Lesson 18, page 22. My name is Michael with the Patriarchal Psaltophiles, and today we're going to talk a little bit about um, the actual terms protopsaltis and lambadarios, give you a little bit of a history about the notation of music, and then talk a little bit about the theory of hijos, what hijos means. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is talk to you a little bit about the terms protopsaltis and lambadarios. When we go on to learn how to chant the liturgy, you're going to see alpha psaltis and vita psaltis. Alpha psaltis is sometimes called the right chanter, and vita psaltis is sometimes called the left chanter. Dexios, aristeros psaltis, or alpha or vita chanters, respectively, or sometimes because alpha and vita with an accent really is taken to mean a Greek numeral. Sometimes we call them protos και δεύτερος psaltis. All of these terms, they're synonymous. However, only for the Patriarchal Church of St. George, we have the terms protopsaltis for the alpha chanter and lambadarios for the vita chanter. Protopsaltis and lambadarios. We also collectively call both of these people teachers. And the reason is that not only they are teachers in their own right as musicians, but the way they stand and then they step down from the analogion and then they step back up. They're wearing a hat. It's called kalpaki. It's like a black hat, for monks or priests. Sometimes they take it off and they put it back on. Sometimes they do the sign of the cross. So all of these motions, getting up and down from the analogion, taking the kalpaki on and off, making the sign of the cross, teaches the people what are the most sacred moments in liturgy. And for these two reasons, because they are music teachers of this sacred art, and they're also teachers for the rest of the people on how to behave in the church, what the correct etiquette is, we call them teachers. I would like to switch and share with you a couple of things. I hope you can see this screen now. Yeah, you should be able to see Iakovos Nafpliotis. So if you go to YouTube and you search with the name Iakovos Nafpliotis, you're going to find these recordings. And we actually have, not we, the company that I believe is called Kalan Müzik. It's a Turkish company and published the CDs of Iakovos Nafpliotis, and they were kind enough to put hundreds, maybe 150 or so recordings of Iakovos Nafpliotis. And you can find them by searching this name. You can copy paste it from the PDF that I share with you. And you're going to find all of the recordings there. Particularly this one that says Kyrie eleison contains the Soson imás Ie Θεού and Homonogenisios. The Monogenisios, along with the Doxa Patri και νυν και αΐ Homonogenisios, that whole thing, I actually took it from this specific recording and I wrote it down in music. So if you listen to this Kyrie eleison piece by Iakovos Nafpliotis, who happens to be chanting with children, you're going to be listening at a real master performing exactly the same music that you are going to be chanting at church. And the recording happened about 100 years ago. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to show you. The second thing I wanted to show you, it's a page about the Patriarchal Church from the patriarchate.org website. You can go to the Church of St. George, and this actually shows you a diagram of the church. Number one here is the candle stand. You know, when you enter a church and you light a candle, so ordinarily you would enter most of the churches, the doors are right where you light a candle. So you would enter the church from right here and you would light a candle, and then you would enter the main church. And this is called the soleas, in between the two analogia or the chanters stands. And this number 5 and number 5 is actually where the here they call them the cantor stalls, or the actual book stands for the chanters to stand. On the right hand side you see the protopsaltis, and on the left hand side you see the lambadarios. Protopsaltis and lambadarios is only for this specific church that you see here. For the rest of us, we are calling ourselves Dexios Psaltis, Aristeros Psaltis, Alpha Psaltis, or Vida Psaltis, Protos Psaltis, Defteros Psaltis, but we never call ourselves Protopsaltis because you are not the first chanter in Ecumeni, which basically means the whole world, the whole planet. So we reserve that title for this person here. Okay, I want to go back to the slides. Okay, let me talk to you a little bit about the history of the notation. We have written evidence for musical notation since the 10th century. Before the 10th century, we don't have evidence of written music. We have, of course, evidence of writings like lyrics, the text with letters, but we do not have any writings before, let's say, 900 AD. At the early stages, the notation used one symbol that the student had to memorize a very long melodic phrase for that one symbol. I'm exaggerating and I'm oversimplifying, but imagine for the Presviestis Theotokou, that whole melody, to have one or maybe two symbols. And every time you see this symbol, you know that you need to expand it and make it long. That was in the very, very early days. And we call that the stenographic way of writing music, stenographic. As centuries progressed, different kinds of notations evolved, and each notation was a little bit more analytical, we call it, than the previous one. And between that very first writing to the one we have today, which is the one that was established in 1814, we have a succession of notations that every 200 or 300 years was kind of like changing. It looked kind of the same. If you look at them on the paper, they look very, very much alike. They have oligon, they have ison, they have apostrophe, they have psiphiston, but they had many more than that. Okay? And in 1814, our ecumenical patriarchate commissioned 3 people, Chrysanth, Gregory, and Hormuzius, Hartophylax, or the archive keeper, to reform the notation, not the music. The music is the same. The notation changed. So with this reform, with what these 3 reformers did, they took the music, but now you have one character for each note, and you know exactly how much to go up and or down. You know exactly how much time it takes for each character, and you even know how to say it with the qualitative characters. Okay. And that is a little bit of history. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about hijos, or hijos to ihu, literally meaning sound. In Byzantine music, we have 8 so-called ichos, or so-called sounds, or modes, or some people call them tones. But no matter what you call them, we have 8 of them. And we have the first, second, third, and fourth ichos, which is called the main ichos, or the Kyrios ichos. And then you have the plaios tu produ, or the plagal of the first, the plagal of the second. We don't say the plagal of the third, we say varis, grave or heavy. And then we have the plaios tu tetartu, or the plagal of fourth. So this is the system of the 8 ichos. Don't get too hung up on the names with this plagal. We are going to treat each ichos as a melodic entity that has specific characteristics. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the characteristics. Tes presviestis Theotokos, όσον ημάσιε Θεού, ομονογεννήσιος, everything we've been chanting so far in that specific scale is what is known in Byzantine music as ichos defteros, or second mode. Well, how do you know it's a second mode and it's not something else? It's not, I don't know, plagal or fourth mode. Well, let's make the distinction between the two. So the presviestis Theotokos has a basis, or a basis, on D. It has a scale that contains 7s and 12s, least and whole tones. It even has its own name. We call it soft chromatic scale. So it has its own bass, it has its own scale. If you remember the melody, it revolves around D and V. And then the third time you do the final cadence that you tes presviestis Theotokos, you do the final cadence on D. So you know that this is the basis of that ichos. Tes presviestis Theotokos, oter soson imas vu. Vu ga di 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 ga di ke di. Right? And then the last time, di di ke di ga di ke zo zo, di di ke di ga di ke di. The, vu, the. Those are called the main nodes. So that's another characteristics. You have the bass, you have the scale, you have the main nodes, and you have the martyries right there, that they show you on which scale you are on. Okay, let's distinguish these defteros ichos from the plaios tu tetartu. This is something you see for the first time. Plaios tu tetartu, new scale. Instead of starting and revolving around D, it starts and revolves around Ni. It goes on Vu, it goes up on D, and then it goes down to Vu, down to Ni. So Ni is the base for this new ichos. The intervals that you see are not the same. They go 12, 9, 7, 12, and then again 12, 9, 7. So you have whole or misondonos, minor, least, and then from the up again you have whole, minor, least. We call these the tetrachords. Okay, 4 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have the lower tetrachord, we have the higher tetrachord. And those specific intervals is what we call the diatonic scale. Again, don't get hung up on a name. It's just called like that. Don't let that scare you. Okay. Do you remember how the martyria of D looked like? It had the letter delta that denoted the phthong was D, but then at the bottom you had this squiggy thing that was different from this one. When we are in this diatonic scale, we're going to use these martyrias when we want to remind ourselves where we're at. If we want to switch from one scale, like diatonic, to another scale, like soft chromatic, we are going to use these phthores. Okay, so this phthora, let's say that you see that kind of phthora, the phthora of the, on an ison or an oligon or an apostrophos anywhere in the text. That tells you that from that moment on, you have to chant this scale. So it's like you're switching from one kind of scale, like chromatic, to another kind of scale, like diatonic. And you can go back and forth using these phthores, okay? For now, you should try and memorize the phthores and the martyrias of the diatonic scale, because we are going to be using them a lot. I am going to chant this scale a couple of times just to make the comparison between this and the second tone, and I think that's a good place for us to stop. Ni pa vu ga di ke zo ni zo ke di ga vu pa ni pa vu ga di ke zo ni zo ke di. Remember what we had at the second tone? We didn't say the ke the. We didn't give it a whole meson tone. We said the ke the. Not the same. So that's how you know when you are in one scale or the other. You're just listening to the intervals. In this case, the ke the ga vu pa ni pa vu ga di ke zo ni zo ke di ga vu pa ni. Okay, and that's the diatonic scale that we are going to be using for plagal of fourth, hijos. All right, I think that's a good time to stop. That was a long lesson today. Thank you for sticking with me, and I will see you next time.